Okay, so this is the last and final video for this week. And I wanted to kick off with talking about and showing you an example of incunabula, which Miller talks about in chapter 2. And what this word originally meant was the very first books that were being printed after the invention of the printing press in the year 1454 in Western Europe. There were printing technologies earlier in Asia, but Johannes Gutenberg traveled and brought back that technology to Europe, and it had a large impact on European society, of which here in the United States we are still referencing in a lot of different ways. So I wanted to show you this image of the Gutenberg Bible, and this is one of the first one of the first texts that were printed with this technology of the Gutenberg printing press. This was a very old, labor-intensive way of printing, but it was revolutionary at the time because prior to that, books were copied by hand by monks, and they were typically only ecclesiastical texts. And you'll see that the first text that Gutenberg is known for printing is a Latin Bible. Now the printing was done with movable type, where the type was set and then impressed upon the pages, very labor intensive, and then this color was added later with hand painting done by professionals. And this is called rubrication here. So you can see that early early printed texts were very colorful and had designs very closely integrated into them. Now, the term incunabula has come to be broadened over the years to embrace any sort of storytelling that is done in a new medium, the earliest versions of the stories that are told within that new medium. And so that also can be used here in our class to reference some of the earlier kinds of digital storytelling that we're going to be looking at, the incunabula of digital storytelling versus the incunabula of print storytelling, which we have an example here. Now, as was stressed in the last video, and which will keep coming up over and over again in this course, is that there are many connections that are being made between old kinds of storytelling and new kinds of storytelling. Again, transmedia storytelling has not just risen up out of a vacuum. Everything that we're doing today with computers and on the internet is not new. In fact, it's very old types of storytelling that have been repackaged for a new medium, which has had really interesting, fascinating effects on how stories are told. But nevertheless, we'll reference back to older forms. And so it's important to investigate these illusions that we're going to see over and over again. Now, for example, we're going to look at here. This is a URL, the website of Frankenstein, which can be found, as our URL tells us, and as this print tells us here, that this is a Project Gutenberg ebook, Frankenstein. And this whole website here, the Project Gutenberg website, is named obviously after the Johannes Gutenberg who brought the printing press to Western European civilization. And so that's an illusion right there, that this is a new form of printing, that what we're going to do is repurpose this old text, the novel of Frankenstein, for an electronic distribution format, which we have right here. So you'll see on page 29 of chapter 2 that there are 3 different stages that incunabula go through for when a new medium is introduced. And the first one is repurposing. And repurposing is basically where you take an old example of a medium and just copy it wholesale into the new medium and don't change anything, basically. And that's pretty much what's happened here. We have Frankenstein, A Modern Prometheus by Mary Wollstonecraft, Godwin Shelley, and then, still have these chapters or hyperlinks here. But then it's just a copy of the alphabetic text that Mary Shelley wrote with her quill pen, and by impressing it into, oops, I should turn off my notifications, by impressing it into paper. Now, the next phase that incunabula goes into is adaptation. And that's what we see in Wales' version of Frankenstein. Here we go. And this is an article on it. Here, let me pause for it. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. I had to pause and pull up the actual Frankenstein film. And this is obviously the opening scenes from Wales' 1931 film adaptation of Shelley's novel. And an adaptation basically is when you take an already established property and then convert it in certain ways in order to make it adapt to the new medium. And so what you see here is we have Wales' version of what he thinks Shelley's Frankenstein would have looked like. And so it's obviously one of the biggest changes is that we've gone from a completely alphabetic text to a visual text. And here we have it's Henry Frankenstein, yes, instead of Victor Frankenstein, and his partner Fritz, who doesn't exist in the book whatsoever, working side by side, trying to find corpses to use for their experiments. And you'll notice that we have a whole scene of actually seeing Frankenstein work with Fritz to cut down corpses that we see visually. What is only alluded to in the most general terms in Shelley's novel. And so, even though she writes so much, and you can notice this in her text about the horror of what he's doing, when you see it visually, it becomes even more viscerally impacted upon the audience about exactly what it is that Frankenstein is up to. Now you'll notice in these adaptations that we watch that the film takes Shelley's novel and moves it from 19th century Switzerland to 20th century Germany. And you might want to think about why Whale made that decision to do that. Like, why move it from the 19th century to the 20th century? What might he have considered about the audiovisual of Switzerland versus Germany from the 19th century to the 20th century? Why would he want to make those changes in the adaptation? The story isn't very much modernized, though. The story pretty much stays the same in the film as it does in the novel. But as we move on to Frankenstein MD, which is a transmedia adaptation of it, we're going to see that Pemberley Digital, the production company that made, here, let me show this to you. Frankenstein MD moved it from 19th century Switzerland to 21st century America, and turned Victor Frankenstein, which was turned into Henry Frankenstein, into Victoria Frankenstein. And so why did they make those changes? Now, for your assignment for today, you're going to need to just focus on Wales for this week, but you have this to look forward to. Now, finally, the third category on page 29 that Miller goes is the creation of totally original content. And we're going to be moving on to that as the semester progresses, as we get into the Guild. Now, she also spends a lot of time talking about the internet's effect on Hollywood and how different kinds of entertainment delivery systems impacted the kind of stories that could be told. And so I'm sure we all notice that we watch a lot more movies on our phones, our tablets, and our computers, and our smart TVs that we want to, that things that we can pull up on whim, on demand. We have a lot of package subscriptions that we have paid into instead of just watching regular TV programming or going to the movie theater. or going to the theater itself, where we see live actors. And we need to think about what it is about each medium, how each medium affects the scale, pace, and pattern of our lives, and how we make different decisions based upon that. Now, it not only impacts our life, but Miller focuses on how digital entertainment and the internet have impacted the scale, pace, and pattern of those who make their livelihood through producing these forms of entertainment, and specifically about budgets. We have to think about how, even though the internet is a form of free entertainment for us, we're actually paying a lot of money to have that content created and then to be delivered to us. So how is that bill being paid if, YouTube is free? And so we need to think about the cost of free platforms. The cost for the production companies themselves and the costumes. Also, how do they pay their camera crews? How do they pay their directors? How do they pay their producers, their boom operators? Everyone from the cast and the crew to the millionaires who are making this all work. So the free delivery system also has its limitations. And this becomes especially complex when we move into what Miller calls a multi-platform strategy, which a story is being delivered over 2, 3, 4, or even 5, even more various platforms. So, and part of what happens, and she goes into this on page 33 in our textbook, is disruptive media, where new media is coming in and is disrupting old delivery systems. And so what happens is that advertising becomes a lot craftier. And how that comes to play in a lot of our life, she focuses on casual gaming. And that's gaming where a product is brought into the narrative, but not just into a scene visually or seeing an advertisement, but for us actually interacting with it as viewers, maybe trying to win something. Like, instead of just being shown a can of Coke, we're given an opportunity to complete a survey and then enter into a raffle and then compete to win a lifetime supply of Coke. All in the name of participating in the story in some sort of way. And we're going to see that become more and more integrated into the transmedia storytelling, again, as we progress through the semester. So that's kind of the end of my summary for Chapter 2 in Frankenstein, the film. But I want to stress that watching these videos is not enough. You really need to pay attention, read the article that was assigned for this week, read the chapter, view the film, take notes on all of those things. When you take the quiz for Frankenstein, it's timed, again, and you only get one chance. So make sure that you have viewed these videos, that you've taken notes, that you've watched the film, that you've read the article, that you've read the chapter, and you're ready to go before you start. So, of course, it's open book because I can't see you. But if you don't know what you're looking for, you're not going to be able to finish the quiz, basically. Also, there is a short assignment, written assignment, where you're going to be weighing in on Fetterman's article on McLuhan. So make sure you read the article and you also watch the video that I gave you some really good examples to help you with that assignment. And then finally, you're going to be bringing it all together in the assignment where you're going to be asked to think about Chapter 2 in digital storytelling and write a couple paragraphs explaining 3 specific challenges that you can now recognize that Whale must have had when adapting Shelley's novel into a film medium. And just be thinking again about McLuhan's idea that the real message of the medium is not how cool the technology is, but how this technology impacts the scale, pace, and pattern of our lives. And that's really what you're going to want to focus on. Okay? So I look forward to reading your homework. I'm going to start grading everything that you submitted for weeks 1 and 2 tomorrow, and hopefully I'll be finished with all of that before end of day on Friday. So you're going to be seeing some movement, some changes on the grade book. Don't become overly alarmed if your grades start swinging wildly. That happens in the beginning of the semester when there aren't very many assignments. It will level out as we progress. Just keep trying to do your best. Every point matters. So keep at it, study, and turn everything in on time. But if you turn it in late within a week, there are penalties, but it's better than turning in nothing at all.